Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this fat, absolutely monstrous reality check on WWDC, where we are going to predict what announcements in terms of hardware we can expect at WWDC, which is an event that is only 7 hours away the moment I started filming this. So let's just go straight into the reality check because we have a lot to talk about today. So we got some good news, some bad news, and everything in between. Let's start with everything in between, because there are some things that are not confirmed, but we are still expecting an update on at least the progress and the status of these products, and or a release / launch / announcement. And obviously the first thing that we have to talk about is AR and VR. Now, these are projects that Apple has been working on, obviously through the iPhone, through the iPad, through many devices that they have, but this is kind of the updates that I expect, right? Developer-grade hardware and updates for people to create more AR apps, VR games, or maybe a fusion of the two, you never know. But what I expect is at least an update in terms of what the developers can expect from Apple in terms of these technologies, and maybe even a developer-grade AR glasses type of prototype that developers can buy and use to actually develop these apps and games with. Now, this is obviously not something for the consumers, but obviously like the Mac Mini that they announced with the A12Z Bionic in it, developers will be able to buy it, and they probably will have to have a reason for it. If you have a good enough reason, you can be amongst those developers. But I do believe we will get an update on this timeline at least, and maybe even the device itself, at least for the developers on stage. Now, for the VR glasses, I feel like the timeline isn't clear yet, not even within Apple. I feel like this project is going to take a longer time than most people expect, but anyways. And then we got some good news. We got analyst after analyst after analyst after leaker after leaker after leaker saying that there is going to be an announcement for a Mac product. And most people are saying that this is a MacBook Pro or MacBook Pros. John Prosser is a leaker who has said MacBook Pro. He said quite clearly MacBook Pro and something else. Or to quote him quite literally, he said one of those things is gonna be MacBook Pro. And he was clearly stating that line in terms of hardware. So obviously we're going to get software and stuff like that. And this is something that is just confusing to me, because are we going to get the Mac Mini as well? Or is Mark Gurman more right than John Prosser is? Because Bloomberg actually reported MacBook Pros, as in multiple, versus John Prosser with a singular MacBook Pro. My take on this is that we're going to get both MacBook Pros, because this is the device that most developers use. I'm a recruiter, apart from being a YouTuber, I do IT recruitment. And most of the developers that I speak to really want to be geared out with a MacBook Pro. And that is just how it goes. And especially the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So at a developers event, I would expect Apple to announce both, because this is the 16-inch is the most popular one amongst developers. And the 14-inch is also awesome. And I feel like most people who are looking at Apple Silicon MacBooks might go for that one because it's one, cheaper, and it has the exact same chip. Maybe less cores, but it has the same chip. And especially for coding, depending on what you are compiling and what you are coding, what you are programming, a 14-inch with a lesser M1X is going to be enough. Now, I'm going to expect these two devices on WWDC. I'm going to say the Mac Mini is going to be announced somewhere else. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I feel like this new device needs a display as well. And for what I have heard, the display isn't ready yet. So then Apple is going to have to announce a affordable Mac Mini again with the Pro XDR display. It looked really weird on the previous event when they did that. And it's probably going to sound and feel weird here as well, because you buy the Mac Mini because you want to have this more affordable way of still having the power of the best Apple computer in a small form factor that you can put anywhere, and also combine with the devices that you already have at home. For example, mouse, keyboard, display. And I believe Apple wants to be ready with a new Thunderbolt display or Cinema display. I don't know how they're going to call it, but I feel like that has to be ready before they get into the redesigned Mac Mini. There has to be a redesigned display for it. At least that's how I feel. Maybe you guys feel differently, and maybe they're going to announce a new display as well on WWDC. But then the event is going to be jam-packed with devices. I don't know if that is going to be realistic to expect. But it would be awesome. I mean, I would love it. But marketing-wise, I don't know if that many devices is going to be a good thing for media attention, for PR, for all the amount of YouTubers that are going to have to review it. It might be a little bit too much. But Anyways, Apple can still do it. I mean, they can do everything what they want, of course. I just don't believe it's realistic. And then we got the bad news. And the bad news is a fat reality check. So let's just say it because it's hard to say. But the M1X MacBook Pro is probably going to be announced at WWDC. But we're probably not going to see it until months later, like the end of the year. And some people say that the redesigned 16-inch MacBook Pro is probably going to launch next year, and that is a bummer. That is stuff that we could have expected because we were asking a lot. We want all the ports back, we want MagSafe, we want an insane chip, we want it to be cool in the chassis, we want mini LED, other people want OLED. There are so many expectations for this laptop, and all these chips and all the technology that's going to be in this device is exactly the same thing that has huge delays because of the virus that happened. But what I'm trying to say here is that it's severely delayed. Apart from apparently the announcement at WWDC, most people believe that at least the fully redesigned version, so maybe this one won't be with mini LED and we might see it sooner, but the fully redesigned versions, how Apple envisioned it with mini LED, is going to be delayed until probably the end of this year and maybe even beginning of next year. So what is actually realistic to believe? Is Apple actually going to announce a MacBook Pro that is redesigned but just doesn't have the mini LED display so they can launch it sooner, right? Maybe in a month, maybe in a month or two. Or are they going to say, well, let's just wait and announce the other MacBook Pro that we wanted to announce in the first place with the mini LED display, and people are going to have to wait. Another option, a third option, which I feel like is not realistic at all, but is that there are going to be two refreshes. One right now, with the entire device redesigned and obviously apart from the display being completely new. And then at the end of the year, there will be an extra option when you purchase the device with mini LED displays. I don't know if that is going to be a good idea, because that means that obviously the mini LED display is slightly thicker, and then the whole device, the whole design without mini LED will just have a lot of room, headspace over. Because I don't believe that they're going to manufacture two separate devices with entirely different chassis just because people want another option. I don't believe that's something that any company should do. But they can, I mean, still they can. I just don't feel like it's realistic to expect. So I believe it's going to be either the one that they're going to announce now is going to be the mini LED and it's going to be delayed, or we're going to get the one without mini LED and then a year later or 2 years later, the mini LED is going to show up in a separate refresh of this MacBook Pro. This is again potential really bad news, especially if the mini LED version is coming right now. And then I would expect that we will have to wait until September or December or maybe even January, February before we can actually get our hands on the device itself. And it happened once before, right? The iMac Pro, and I feel like also the Mac Pro, it got an announcement, but then it took really long before we actually could buy the actual device. And I can completely understand that sometimes technology isn't ready yet, or the chips are too rare, or production is extremely delayed because of a massive pandemic, but we will survive. And I still believe that WWDC is going to be an amazing event, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. This was the last video that we are going to publish here on this channel before WWDC. Probably, if there isn't any breaking news that we have to report on with breaking news. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys are going to enjoy the event. And for now, I hope you guys obviously click on.